Thanks, Margie, and thank you too, Emilio, for helping set this up. I'm really delighted to be here, and I bring you greetings from the University of Illinois. Okay, so let me begin by expressing some gratitude first to my colleagues and supporters at the U.S. Forest Service. The folks in the NUCVAC program have been supporting my work for a couple of decades, and the Northern Research Station, Lynn Westfall and Paul Gobster, and that group has been really very instrumental, not only in supporting the work, but intellectually to helping me craft some of these ideas. We've also had support from the U.S. National Science Foundation and a whole variety of students and colleagues. Okay, so my group at Illinois and I, we study the impacts of living with everyday contact with urban forests, places like this, and this scene here that connect people to nature in a far better way than in this scene. I took this picture a couple of weeks ago when I was in Toronto. I want to tell you a story about how exposure to urban forests enhances learning for students. We'll focus on two issues that impact learning. The first is going to be stress, and the second is attention. You might be wondering, what kind of evidence could I present that would make a solid case for the connection between exposure to urban forests and learning? I'll try to answer that question throughout the presentation here. But first, I want to ask you a question. While I'm presenting evidence from studies associated with students, I wonder if you can think about who else these findings might generalize to. Do the findings only relate to the kids involved in the studies, or do they have broader applicability? So that's a question I'll ask you guys at the end of the presentation here. In our research, we asked, to what extent does it matter that children go to school in a place that looks like this, or places that are devoid of contact with urban forests and other forms of nature? Does having a view like this outside your classroom window impact your capacity to learn? In the few minutes that I've got with you this afternoon, I'm going to talk about our capacity to recover from stress and to pay attention. And then I'm going to tie these capacities to learning. So let's begin with stress. When you experience a threat, whether it's from a traffic jam or an unreasonable child or an unreasonable boss or even a spider, your nervous system responds by releasing a flood of stress hormones. These hormones include adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones rouse your body for emergency action. Your heart pounds faster when you see that spider or that boss or that traffic jam. Your muscles tighten, your blood pressure rises, your breath quickens, and your senses become sharper. These hormones increase your strength and your stamina. They speed your reaction time. They enhance your focus. And if you're a U.S. Forest Service employee, they make you ready to fight whatever it is, the stress that you're facing. And if you're a research scientist or a university professor, you're probably ready to flee and get out of there. When you perceive a threat or a threatening situation, your hypothalamus identifies the stressor, and then it sends a signal to your pituitary gland, which then in turn sends a signal to your adrenal glands, which pump cortisol into your bloodstream. Now, this is a health-enhancing system. It's really a wonderful system, and if you're in a immediately dangerous situation, it can save your life because you can either engage the threat or you can run away quickly. The problem is we've created a world in which stress is a consistent part of our daily experiences, and high levels of stress are a particular challenge for people who are in school or who are trying to learn things, because when people feel stressed, they're just not good learners. It costs you to be stressed if you're trying to learn. For centuries, philosophers, poets, and pundits have suggested that a dose of nature can help people reduce the stress that they feel. And it seems plausible that a variety of forms of nature, say views of urban forests or rain gardens or bioswales or green roofs or birds and animals may also help people recover from stress. Let me change my focus here and talk a little bit about attention. This is Rachel and Stephen Kaplan, and they're the authors and the people that put forth this notion of attention restoration theory. Attention restoration theory makes a connection between landscapes that we design and build and urban forests in particular, and one of our most important capacities as humans, a capacity that underlies just about every single thing that we want to accomplish in our lives, and that's our capacity to pay attention. When we have two modes of paying attention. One is called involuntary, and one is called directed attention, or paying attention, what most of us call paying attention. And we can look at or talk about these two kinds of attention in terms of how much effort they take. Involuntary attention takes none. You can think about what kinds of things might take no effort to attend to. One that's kind of obvious is a baby. Somebody walks into a room holding a tiny newborn, and it's just very easy to have our attention drawn to that child. All kinds of things in nature are effortless to look at. There's a little video, I guess, that I'm not seeing the video, so maybe the video is not going to play. But you get oh, there's the video. This scene I took last spring in Pennsylvania, and I was captivated by looking at this fellow who was fly fishing in this beautiful little stream, and I was thinking about his what was capturing his attention at the moment, and it seems very clear to me that he's not working hard. He's not expending effort to pay attention to this to the beautiful stream and the engaging experiences that he's involved in. William James, the psychologist who wrote at the end of the 19th century, said that there's a whole variety of things that capture our attention effortlessly. Things that are kind of fascinating, things that are threatening, any kind of violence or blood or accident or surprise humor, things like this. It turns out, and this is one of the brilliant innovations or insights of Stephen and Rachel Kaplan, is that urban forests and scenes of nature actually draw on this involuntary attention. They don't take a lot of effort for us to look at. And that's an important thing to think about, especially when we compare paying attention. Paying attention does take effort. It requires, in some cases, a great deal of effort. Here's a dissertation I was editing recently, and I can sit down and focus my attention on this, and when I do so, it takes a fair amount of effort to begin with, but as I do it for a longer and longer time, it takes more effort. Now, we can also talk about the two kinds of attention with respect to how much they fatigue. And it's pretty clear that if you're looking at the fire in the fireplace or the waterfall, something that's part of involuntary attention, you don't fatigue at all. Looking at this stream, for instance, you may get bored of it after a while, but you're not going to become fatigued with it. So let's move on to the next slide and be done with that. Paying attention, on the other hand, is fatiguing. It does fatigue, and I think everybody's experienced this. I'm hoping that you're not experiencing it at the moment, but maybe you are. Let me tell you why it fatigues. When you pay attention to that dissertation that you're looking at, or to a proposal you're writing, or proposals that you're evaluating, or a budget or a hiring plan that you're doing, what you have to do is you have to exclude two sources of competing stimuli that your brain is inclined to pay attention to. The first source of stimuli is all the stuff that's happening in the world around you. The conversation that's going on in the hallway outside your office, the traffic noise, the radio program or web broadcast that you can hear on somebody else's computer, the smell of somebody making microwave popcorn down the hall, all that stuff that's kind of drawing your attention. In order to pay attention to the task at hand, the thing you want to focus on, you've got a mechanism in your brain that essentially moves that stuff away to create a kind of a more salient focus on the task at hand. The second source of stimuli that you have to exclude from your attention is all the stuff that's going around in your brain at any one time. So there's the stuff in the environment and all that stuff that says, don't forget to bring home the milk, don't forget to write that email, don't forget how you got to pay that bill. All that stuff that's floating around in your head at any one moment has to kind of get dampened down so that you can pay attention to the material that you want to focus your attention on. And the critical issue here is that mechanism that dampens down that other stuff and allows you to focus, that mechanism fatigues with use. You have a limited amount of time each and every day that you can use it. You have a limited amount of time in any one setting. For me, it's about an hour, hour and a half. In the mornings, I can go a little longer. But after an hour and a half of intense focusing, I really need a break. It's hard for me to keep focusing at the same level. This is really important because we've created a world in which we depend on our attention in a typical day all the time. We're very, very much focusing our attention. And paying attention is, like I said earlier, it matters for just about everything we care about, for learning and problem solving, planning ahead, and monitoring ourselves, engaging in effective functioning with other people. And when your attentional capacity fatigues, there are some real costs. When you are mentally fatigued, there are some significant costs. The first is that you're less likely to actually pay attention. It's significantly harder to pay attention when you're mentally fatigued, so you miss important cues. When you're mentally fatigued, you're more likely to be irritable. It's not a given that you'll be irritable, but there's a higher probability that when you're mentally fatigued, you'll be more irritable. And finally, people who are mentally fatigued are much more likely to be impulsive. They're much more likely to find something attractive in the moment that they want to engage in, that even though that thing may work against their long-term goals. Now, the beauty of attention restoration theory is that Kaplan proposed that urban nature and urban forests in particular call on the use of involuntary attention, and in doing so, they provide us a chance to rest and restore our capacity to pay attention. What I'd like to do now is I'll take you through 3 studies that explore these ideas in some detail, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the background of each study, and then I'm going to show you the data so that we can that. So the first study is from Berman, Jonathan, Kaplan. It was published in 2008. They had 38 participants, University of Michigan graduate students, and they had them do 2 things. They came into the lab one day, and half of them were randomly assigned to walk in downtown Ann Arbor, and the other half were randomly assigned to walk in the Arboretum. This was a within subject study. That means everybody in the study did both conditions, just in a random order. Before they went on the walk, they did this little attention test called Digispan backwards, and then after they came back from the walk, they did it again. Some of you may have done Digispan backwards. It's kind of some people find it fun and engaging, and other people find it really annoying. It's a test in which the researcher will say, okay, now I'm going to say a series of digits, a series of numbers, and I'd like you to repeat those numbers back to me in reverse order. So the researcher might say, are you ready? 3, 9, 2. And then the person would say 2, 9, 3. And they would give the person 3 digits, and they would ask them to repeat those 3 digits in 2 trials. And then they'd move on to 4 digits and do 2 times that, and 5 digits, 2 times that. And they keep going until the person got 2 consecutive trials wrong. So here's a look at at some typical scenes of the walk in downtown Ann Arbor. You can see that it's not a barren place by any stretch. It's got a decent urban forest, in fact, but it's not nearly as green as the Arboretum. And here's some scenes Arboretum. Okay, so they took the test, the DigiSpan backwards test, and they went for a walk in one of these places, and they came back and they took the test again. Then a couple days later, they came back to the lab. They took the DigiSpan test again. They went for a walk in the other place, and then they came back to the lab and they took the DigiSpan test again. So now what I'd like to show you is the results of that study. And the vertical bars here are the vertical axis of this experiment is going to be the number of trials that they got correct. So that they're paying attention better, they would have gotten more trials correct. And then on the horizontal axis, we'll look at the average number of trials correct before they went for the walk, and then after they got back from the downtown walk, and after they got back from the Arboretum. So how many trials did they get correct before the walks? Well, on average, 7.9. So they did pretty well. How did they do after walking in downtown? Do you think they did better or did they do worse? They, in fact, did the same. There's no statistically significant difference. There's no difference in these two numbers. They did not, the walk in downtown did not improve them or degrade them. How about in the walk in the Arboretum? The walk in the Arboretum, there was a big difference there. The walk in the natural setting, they got 1.5 trials more correct than before. This is a big increase. It's a significant increase. It's what we would expect if we gave a person a dose of Ritalin, for instance. We would expect them to be able to have this kind of a percentage increase in their capacity to score well on this test. So the urban forest in this case is, the exposure to green spaces in this case, the greener the space, the greater the impact on attention. Let me tell you now about a study that a PhD student and I, Dongying Li, have just published online in the journal of Landscape and Urban Planning. In this research, we used an experimental design in which high school students were randomly assigned to classrooms that varied in their level of exposure to green space. We asked for high school students under academic-related stress, will views to trees actually make a difference? And are there identifiable effects of green spaces on students' levels of stress or their ability to pay attention? And what's the magnitude of the effect we want to know? And then we also are interested in when did the effect happen? We looked at 5 different high schools. We had students from 5 different high schools. And within each high school, students participated in their own high school. And in each of the high schools, we had 3 kinds of rooms. The first room is, this is an example from one of those rooms. It's a classroom that has no windows in it. So there's a little video here that shows, it's a classroom that many of us have experience with. It's a high school classroom that looks like a classroom, and it doesn't have any windows in it. Okay, Milo, let's go to the next one. The next classroom is shown, or the next type of classroom is shown here, and that classroom is a classroom. I don't think there's a video here. Whoops. This is the third kind of classroom, and this classroom is has a window in it, and it looks out onto a green space. I want to go back. Let's get rid of this. Okay, so this is the second kind of classroom in this slide, and this classroom shows windows in the classroom that look out into a built space. So the sunlight or natural light comes in, but there's no vegetation that the students saw when they were in this classroom. And then let's skip this video. So the 3 classrooms are shown, the 3 types of classrooms are shown here on the left. The no windows, windows with a view out into a built space but no vegetation, and a classroom with a view with, out to a green space. Here's the procedure. We invited the students to come into their own schools. They filled out some forms, and then they were randomly assigned to go to one of those rooms in their school. Once they got in the room, we got some baseline stress and attention measures from them. Then we gave them 30 minutes of academic activities in the classroom. Then we gave them a 10-minute break also in the classroom. And then we took those baseline measures again. We did letters for 94 students. Let me tell you a little bit about the academic activities they were engaged in. First of all, we had them do a 5-minute speech. We told them they had to make a 5-minute speech. For many young people, making a 5-minute speech in front of some strangers can be a very stressful event. We also asked them to do some proofreading. The proofreading is shown by this example here. They got a piece of paper. Actually, they got a stack of papers, and they were asked to look at the first 3 letters in the line here. So in this case, it would be RXB, and then they would cast their eye down that line, and they were asked to identify if that combination of RXB exists anywhere else along that line, and if so, how many times it was visible. And then they would go to the next line, and they had to forget RXB in this case, and now remember the next 3 letters, BIU, and see if BIU existed, and circle that if it existed once or more times in that line. They did this little exercise for 15 minutes. It proves to be a very mentally fatiguing task, and people are generally happy to be done with it. I don't really know why the University of Illinois Human Subjects Committee lets us get away with this kind of event, but they did, and it allowed us to fatigue people's attentional capacity. And then finally, just to make sure they were feeling kind of toasted, we asked them to subtract the number 13 from 4,029, and then to keep subtracting 13 from the answer that they got. And they had to do this without any help of paper or pencil or calculator. And they did this subtraction exercise for 5 full minutes. Okay, so how do we measure their attention? We use digits forward, which is the opposite of digits backward. We just said a series of numbers, and they repeated those numbers to us in exactly the same order. Here again, we started with strings of digits that were 3 numbers long, and we did that twice, and then 4 numbers long, and we did that twice, and then 5 numbers long, and so forth. We also used digits backwards, which we talked about in the Kaplan study just a few minutes ago. And we did that until they had 2 consecutive errors. And then finally, we used the Stroop color word test. I don't know if any of you have used the Stroop before. It's kind of a fun little exercise. You give the participants a piece of paper, and on the paper is written the names of different colors. And names of the colors are written in an ink that doesn't match the meaning of the names. So you see that here on your screen. Green is written in blue ink. So the first part of this is to actually do a short little exercise with 50 words that's super easy, and all of us do well every day. And that is to simply read the words as they're written on the page. So that, for instance, the participant would read green, blue, yellow, yellow, red, blue, just the meaning of the words. And you take that piece of paper away, you give them another piece of paper, and you say, okay, this time we don't want you to read the words. What we'd like you to do is to say out loud the color of the ink for each word. And this proves to be a little more cognitively demanding. We're good at reading the words. We're also decent at reading the color of the ink, but saying the color of the ink takes a little longer. We process the meaning of the written word faster, which means in order to say the color, we have to inhibit the impulse to say the name of the word that we read on the page and wait a little longer while our brain is processing the color of the ink and making that color salient in our consciousness and saying that. So it's a good, when people are mentally fatigued, they're not good at this task. So it's a good measure of attentional functioning. Okay, so now what did we find? Did the views to trees and green landscapes improve the capacity of students to pay attention? Well, I'm going to show you the effects, the outcomes here. I'm going to look at I'm going to compare for the 3 window conditions. The no windows going to be in blue, the barren in a kind of yellow color, and the green window or the green view in green ink. And we're going to compare how the students did on the attention tasks after the classroom activities, so after they went through the subtraction tests and the proofreading and whatnot, and then after the 10-minute break. And the first one here is We're going to look at digits forward. So how many trials did they get correct on digits forward? And here there's 3 questions that we can ask. Is there a difference between the period after the task and after the break? So and what impact did the break have is one question. Another question we can have is, did the window view have an impact during the classroom tasks or afterwards? So let's look at the no windows condition first. Here we see that there was no difference, no statistical difference, no meaningful difference at all between how well they scored on digits forwards before and after the break in the classroom that had no windows. How do you think they did in the barren window room? Probably better because it has at least that sunlight coming in, right? No difference whatsoever. There's no measurable difference before or after there either. How about in the green condition? Ooh, bing. So there was a 12% increase at the end of the break between the after class period and the 10-minute break. Wow. So let me just put this in another word. Another way to say this is that for the kids in the no window room or in the room that just had the light coming in but no view of vegetation, the break was worthless. It was as though they didn't have a break. There was no impact of a break. But for the kids who had the view of green space outside their window, they performed significantly better after the break. We found similar results for the when we used digits backwards. No significant difference before or after for the kids in the no window condition. No significant difference before or after for the kids in the barren window, but a significant increase for the kids who were in the green room. How about, let's turn our attention now to the Stroop. We did the Stroop only once. The Stroop is a test that's subject to learning, and we wanted to make sure that the kids didn't have an advantage from learning, so we just did it one time. So we're going to compare the 3 window conditions that they're at the bottom of the histogram, no window, barren, and green, and we're going to look at the number of times they got wrong answers when they answered key questions on the Stroop, when they said the color of the ink wrong, for instance. So for the kids in no window condition, they get about 2.5 errors over the 50 words. For the kids in the barren condition, they did better. They only had 1.8 errors. The kids in the green condition, they had almost 10 times fewer errors in the green condition than in the barren condition. To me, these are really interesting findings, and they seem to have really important implications for the kinds of settings that we're designing and places that we're designing for young people to try and learn in. Now, you might be wondering, well, how big is the impact of the green on attention, and how much more does the view contribute to kids' capacity to pay attention once you've considered other things like demographics and their chronic levels of stress and mental fatigue? So we measured that, and when we accounted for demographics, we saw that we explained about 6% of the variance in the answers. And then when we added into the multiple regression chronic levels of stress and mental fatigue, we found that we explained another 9%. And then when we added in the greenness of the view, we increased the explanatory power by another 13%. So this is a very substantial, in terms of someone that works on the built environment, explaining an additional 13% of the variance after you've included the social and some of the performance variables is really quite a significant amount of explanatory power. So we're really excited about these findings and think that have some implications for how we design school grounds. I've recently written a chapter about this very topic, about attention restoration and the impact of urban forests and urban landscapes on our capacity to pay attention. It's in this book, Fostering Reasonableness, Supportive Environments That Bring Out Our Best. It's edited by Rachel Kaplan and Abik Basu, and in this, I wrote a chapter, it's chapter 4 in the book entitled In Search of a Clear Head. And you can type this in Search of a Clear Head and my name into your web browser, and it'll take you to the University of Michigan Press, and you can read this chapter for free if you want. You can order the book from Amazon, or you can read the whole book online for free if you'd like. Okay, what about stress? How do the window views impact the students' recovery from stressful experiences? Well, to measure stress, we used a variety. We used the tool that I just showed you. It's called the ProComp 50, or ProComp 5, actually. ProComp 5, it makes 2,040 measurements per second. We used a variety of measures to measure how stressed the students were, their blood volume pulse, their skin temperature, the amount of perspiration on their fingertips, for instance. And we simply asked, do kids who have greener views or green views on a landscape recover from the stressful experience faster than they might have otherwise? I'm not going to take you through the longer description of this. You can see it in the article that was just published. But let me give you the base information here. So we've got the 3 window views: no window, barren window, and green view window on the horizontal axis at the bottom. And then I'm going to give you the change from stress to rest, how much stress they were feeling. If the bars go up, that means they're feeling more stress after the rest, and if the bars go down, they'll feel that indicates that we measured less stress in each individual, or on average, after the break. So we standardized the scores from the 4 physiological measures so that we can compare them across the conditions. So we'll be comparing from 0, and we'll see here that after the break, the kids in the no window condition were not significantly different in terms of the amount of stress they experienced. In fact, I think here again we could say pretty clearly that break had no impact on the stress that they were feeling. They had the same level of stress after the break, 10 minutes in that no window room, than before. The kids in the barren view, however, they were doing worse. They actually had more stress at the end of that 10-minute break than before. And the kids in the green view, they had significantly less stress as measured by these physiological tools. They were experiencing significantly less stress after their 10-minute break in the green view. We did a multiple regression with the demographics and chronic stress and chronic mental fatigue variables to see if having the green view added any explanatory power with respect to the stress variable, and we found that it indeed did. Again, an additional 13% of the variance was explained by the green view. Once again, this is a pretty significant and very positive impact for those of us who are working on urban forest issues. This article has just been published online, come out in print in the April 2016 issue of Landscape and Urban Planning, but you can download it online. In fact, you can download all of my articles online. If you go to ResearchGate and type in William C. Sullivan, I've got almost every one of my publications is available online. You can download them for free at this site, and I would encourage you to do so. Okay, let me tell you, we're going to wrap up quickly with this next study. In this study, it's a brand new study, and the data are still being crunched on this. We asked, how does having connection with an urban forest impact a person's capacity to pay attention while they're engaging in some form of technology, like using a laptop or using an iPad or using a cell phone? The question we asked is, are green landscapes still restorative in spite of technological engagement? Or in other words, are green landscapes, when you have a digital technology that you're engaging with, do you get the benefits of a green landscape? So to explore this, we did an experiment in which people were randomly assigned. These were University of Illinois students, and they were randomly assigned to one of 4 treatment groups that you can see here. The treatment groups had about 19 students on average in the various categories. So some of the kids were in a barren space, and some of them were randomly assigned to a green space, and some of them were randomly assigned to use their laptops, and others were randomly assigned not to use their laptops. So it gave us a very nice little 2x2 experimental design. We brought the students into the laboratory or into a classroom on campus where we got them to sign the RB forms, and we gave them a bit of an orientation, and then we gave them a simple attention test. We used the Digispan Forward. Here you can see the trials there. We also gave them some cognitively demanding tasks. So again, they did the same proofreading test as the high school kids. And then we took their capacity, we took their attentional functioning again after that. And then they went outside and they took a break. They went into either a green landscape on campus or an outdoor space that had no view of anything green, certainly no trees. And then half of the people that were outside used their laptops, and half did not. And half of the kids that were in the barren space were randomly assigned to use their laptops, and others did not. And when they used their laptops, we asked them to do the kinds of things that they would typically do during break. They could surf the web, they could text, and they could do email, that kind of stuff. And then finally, we brought them back inside, and we had them do the test of attention one more time. So we hypothesized that, based on previous research, that the barren spaces using a laptop would not be restorative. They would be the least restorative. And the green spaces with no laptop would be the most restorative. But we had no idea what would it be like if you're in a barren space and you've got access to the internet or to your email. Is that kind of a restorative thing? Or if you're in a green space and you've got access to those same things, does that increase the restoratives? Is it just the same as without the laptop, or is it worse? We didn't really know. We didn't have it. So what I'm going to show you now are the results. Are the results of the 4 types of conditions. Before the rest, we'll look at their attention scores before the rest and after the rest. And here we'll look at the number of trials correct. I guess we're not seeing the background of this, but this is around 6 trials correct before the rest, and 6.3 or 4 after the rest. So no statistically significant differences for the kids in the barren, no laptop condition. The same was true for the kids in the barren laptop condition. So having a laptop in a barren space was a very similar outcome. How about the kids in the green laptop condition? That bar is behind. The green laptop condition, you see there was no impact of having the break if you were in a green space with a laptop. How about the kids in the green, no laptop? Well, the kids in the green with the no laptop, they had a 13% or 12% increase in their attentional functioning over the course of that short break. Another way to say this is that the kids in the conditions that were barren or in the green laptop, they performed on the attention test at the same level as you would expect if they did not have the break. In other words, their test scores were the same before the break and after the break, no significant differences. The break had it was like they took no break whatsoever. Now let's compare the groups across the conditions quickly here, because when we look at this, really the most interesting findings are for the kids in the green space with no laptop. So let's look at those kids. The 3 groups in the all other conditions, the 2 barren conditions and the green laptop conditions, compared to the green no laptop conditions. How did they do? How do they do when we compare the scores on the attention tests? Well, as you can see here, the kids in the green condition with no laptop scored about 18% higher than the kids in the other two conditions. 18% higher, again, is what you'd expect from a clinical dose of Ritalin that was prescribed by a physician. So kids that actually have the capacity to not engage their digital devices while they're taking a break actually get the cognitive benefits of a break, while those of us who go outdoors and think we're getting that same break, probably the evidence here suggests that they don't gain that impact. I think this has some implications, and it suggests that sending kids to school when they have views of spaces that are not green out their windows or have no windows at all may be having significant costs on their capacity to learn and to recover from stressful conditions. I would suggest that going to school in a windowless classroom or in classrooms that look out to built spaces puts children at a competitive disadvantage. Maybe a quick set of implications that I think, and these are implications that move a little bit away from the science, and they're my personal opinions. This is what the science means to me. So let me just be clear that I'm not, I'm speaking from that perspective. First of all, urban forest speed recovery from stress. Well, we've got scientific data on that. We live in a world today that's often very stressful. We've constructed a world, a modern environment in which we've got stressful experiences happening all the time. And many urban areas are devoid of trees and other natural elements that could help facilitate recovery from stress or help people recover from mental fatigue. And yet, here we are in modern cities with a huge amount of the infrastructure devoted to automobiles and very little green infrastructure whatsoever. Personally, I don't want anybody to live in places that look like this. I don't want my neighbors to live like this. I don't want my coworkers, or I don't want hospital workers or school teachers or police officers to live like this. Because when people live in conditions that look like this or exposed to these kinds of environments, they're not going to be performing at their best. They're going to recover more slowly from stress, and they're going to recover more slowly from the inevitable mental fatigue that they experience. A picture I took in Sweden recently. When people live in places that look like this, in Sweden, they get powerful help from the physical environment, especially from the urban forest, when it comes to the stress or the mental fatigue that they're experiencing. So another implication is that urban forest speed recovery from mental fatigue. Everybody who uses their attention is at risk for mental fatigue. This includes college students and school children. It includes office workers. And there's really important information about cancer patients having positive impacts on cancer patients' capacity to recover from mental fatigue. We need to find opportunities to connect these people to urban nature and urban forests in particular, which brings up my final recommendation, and that is that we simply, landscape architects and urban planners and urban foresters have to work together to provide easy access to urban forests. We need to make sure that street trees are abundant, and the research suggests that we should be having a minimum of 30 to 40% canopy cover, and that ought to be our goal. And that ought to be our goal for a whole variety of reasons that are environmental as well as social. You know, great cities have great parks. This is Governor's Island Park in New York. It was designed by 8 West. It's just a phenomenal and wonderful new landscape. And this is Northerly Isle, designed by JJR Landscape Architects in Chicago, Illinois. The former Meigs Airport turned into a park. What a wonderful, wonderful place. Great cities have great parks like this. But the research that we've been conducting, that I've talked to you about today, and actually the work that we've been doing for years in Chicago and other places, demonstrates that parks, big, centrally located parks like this, while they're critical for a healthy city, they're not enough to help people on a daily basis. In cities, we need to look for every single opportunity that we can to include green infrastructure in neighborhoods, in spaces between buildings. This is especially important in larger cities where access to nature can be difficult. These are pictures I took a couple of weeks ago in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is an incredibly dense place, and there's very little opportunity to infuse nature within the context of that environment. But it is possible, and in some cases you find that the trees find a way to live and thrive even in a place as dense as Hong Kong. But you know, dense cities like New York City. This is Paley Park in New York City. Great cities find ways to make sure that they're infused with green infrastructure and with urban forests in particular. We can also work to connect green spaces to each other with regional trails, especially trails that encourage walking and biking. And it's a really wonderful opportunity to kind of create healthier, more dynamic, more exciting, interesting places when we combine trees and green places like this. So we can design bike trails and walking trails that connect urban green spaces and urban forests together. And of course, as we've already seen, we can make sure our schools and municipal buildings are nestled in green areas that include a lot of trees. And perhaps the simplest way for me to conclude is to leave you with the notion that what we need is urban forests at every doorstep. That concludes my comments, and now I'm happy to take questions or engage in the next set of processes that Margie tells me to engage with.